Everybody, thank you for joining us this week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network, talking about debt, how to avoid it, how to get out of it, how to manage it. Back with us on the program is Norman Perlmutter, CPA, author of the book, How to Settle Your Debts and Climb Out of the Hole You're In Without Committing Financial Suicide. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us, very simple to remember norms. It's getoutofdebtcoach.com. An excellent website. There are free tips there. He'll walk you through what you really need to know to get out of debt, to manage the debt. If you go to our website, we've got a full list up there of what Norm's going to be talking about again on the program today. The 10 killer mistakes you must avoid when you attempt to get out of debt. We've already in past programs gone through several. We'll recap those and then bring on some new ones today. Norm, first of all, welcome to This Week in America. Great to have you back with us.
Oh, I appreciate it, Rick. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
You just keep reading. So many people are getting further and further behind. So each time we have you back, it seems like what we're talking about probably applies to more people. Let's go through quickly some of the 10 killer mistakes. We're already up to, we've gone through number 4. We'll be picking up 5 here shortly. First one is having the wrong attitude. That's listed as number 1. Briefly, what are we talking about there?
Well, the problem is that so many people out there are caught up in misconceptions about debt, about what it really takes to get out of debt, about what credit this can do to you if you don't pay your debt. And because they don't understand these things, they feel that they're stuck with it. So they don't believe that they can get out of debt. So they take steps. They don't educate themselves, which is very important in the process of getting out of debt. You have to, knowledge is power. I hate to say it; it's an old cliche. Well, it's not really a cliche. It's a famous quote. But the point is, if you know what you're doing and if you understand the process and you understand what's involved, it gives you a lot of leverage, and you can really work yourself out of debt much more cost-effectively and much faster than most people believe you can. So the attitude has to be you can do it, and you have to buy into that. And the second thing with regard to attitude is you have to make certain commitments, which entail, number 1, and of course of utmost importance, start living a financially responsible life. Obviously, if you want to get out of debt, you got to stop building or increasing your debt. So you got to start living within your means. And the third, and also very important, is anybody who's decided to work towards getting out of debt, they have to be in control of their own situation. They can't just hand it over to somebody and expect them to do the best job for them. Your agenda is you. You're going to do the best job for you. Other people who might help you, for the most part, their agenda is them and their company, and what they're going to do is what's best for them. And I'm not saying everybody out there is going to scam you like that, but a lot of people will, especially in this type of situation.
Well, the information that you give that we've talked about on past programs that we're talking about today, available at Norm's website, getoutofdebtcoach.com, will give you that information you need where you actually can take control and guide this process.
Well, control is, the problem with control is many people, and people I know, people I work with, are afraid of this. They don't really, it's like when the market's going down, you don't want to open your brokerage statement because you're afraid to look at what you're going to see.
Yes.
Well, people, I know so many people who get their monthly credit card statements, and all they do is open them. They open them with sort of their eyes closed, and they're only looking for one thing, the minimum payment. They don't want to see anything else. They don't want to see what their balance is. They don't want to see how much more they added to their balance the prior month. They don't check. They're just afraid to look. And the first thing in taking control is knowing where you're at, and you have to figure that all out. And it's very important. I mean, it's not hard. You don't have to be an accountant to do it. You just have to be willing to do it. You just sit down and you schedule it all out. And that's what you have to do. You have to understand where you are before you can start taking action to make it better.
We're talking with Norman Perlmutter, author of the book, How to Settle Your Debts. His website, getoutofdebtcoach.com. We're going through the 10 killer mistakes you must avoid. Number 2, we're reviewing here. Number 2 is making uninformed decisions.
Yeah, and it's all very related to taking control. How can you make a decision as to how to handle a problem when you don't know the full extent of the problem? You have to know how much you owe, how much you're paying each month, and how much of that is going towards debt, how much of it is going towards interest. You'll be surprised to find out, probably, if you're making minimum payments, that about 95% of it is going towards interest, which means, of course, you'll never get out of debt, because if you're paying 5% a month, figure it out. people have to know their rights. People are intimidated by debt collectors who call them and say, "We're going to come and take your assets. We're going to take your bank account." Well, they can't do it. Nobody can take your bank account unless they go to court and get a judgment against you. Until that happens, the IRS can go after your bank account. The U.S. Department of Education could go after your bank account to some degree for student loans, but that's it. They can't do it. They're lying to you, and people believe them, and it forces them to do things that they would not do if they understood their rights. And they have to know their options. There are many options, or many tactics, I like to call them, that you can use to get out of debt. There's not just one process. There's not, you don't go to a debt consolidation company, and that's not necessarily the way to get out of debt. That's simply one tactic that can be used in the process, and it's probably one of the weakest and the worst to use in any event, because it's more of a postponement technique than it is a debt elimination technique, which is key, because what you want to do is eliminate debt, not postpone paying it. And a lot of people out there, all they're doing is they're making deals that allow them to pay less a month and postpone actually paying off the debt.
You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest on the program is Norman Perlmutter, CPA and author, How to Settle Your Debts and Climb Out of the Hole You're In Without Committing Financial Suicide. His website, very informative, getoutofdebtcoach.com. The 10 mistakes we'll have up on our website, and you can go there and link on to Norm's website as well. So important that the people understand, and we've talked about it frequently in the program, there really are laws that protect you, and if you know what your rights are, you may even find out these collectors are violating those rights, and you even have legal recourse to sue them.
No question about it. Many bill collectors, and I know because I was a bill collector. I mean, I ran a collection agency for many years, though I did it on the I did not consciously violate the law, but I know the industry. I know, and I know that even some of the major collection agencies violate the law every day, violate federal law by making threats that they don't have the right to make, or by trying to intimidate people, by saying things they shouldn't be saying to people, by communicating with people in ways that aren't permitted by the law. The law is pretty simple, and it's enormously protective of the consumer. And the law we're talking about, of course, is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. It's a federal law enacted way back in 1978, and revised a couple of times, and it's enormously protective of people with regard to the tactics of debt collectors, and people should know it. There are a lot of places you can find out about it, and it's amazing what people will do, because what debt collectors tell them, that's in a way that isn't true.
Among the many things you can find free on Norm's website, getoutofdebtcoach.com, is the debt collection and credit lingo. So the terms that he's talking about, the terms that you really need to do so you can protect yourself and use it as leverage, is to understand these terms. You can find that at the website. We're going through the top 10 killer mistakes. 3, we sort of touched on it: trusting snake oil salesmen, the debt consolidators, debt settlement, and a quick fix scheme. Actually, Norm's talked about you can do this yourself if you really know what you're doing, and you'll do it better because it's you're talking about. And number 4 is not seeking a permanent solution. And you're big on that, okay, you got in a position, let's get you out of it, understand how you got here so you don't turn around and duplicate the mistake. Number 5 is a new one: being naive, acting on impulse or emotion and not with caution. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the 3 biggest areas that I find is, where people violate a principle of or people are naive and do the wrong thing is they're easily, and what we talked about before, they're easily intimidated because they don't know their rights. And most of the things you're told by debt collectors is not true. All that a debt collector can do is ask you to pay. They do it in some very, very, very convincing ways, but they can't do anything else. Without a judgment in their hand, they can't take anything from you on a credit card debt, which is an unsecured debt. They can't touch you. All they can do is make threats, which they cannot fulfill. Okay, they can report you to a credit bureau. The one thing they can do that can hurt you, if credit is important to you, is they can hurt your credit by reporting the delinquency. But that's about it. A lot of people think that creditors are going to help them. Well, they're not. The only way a creditor or a debt collector is going to help you is if you exercise leverage, which means that by not paying, you create leverage, because the only way they can get paid from you is if you pay them voluntarily. with an unsecured debt, unless, of course, as we said before, you have a judgment and they're able to go after your bank account or something. So you have leverage. So if you understand this, and if you understand that they can't do the things to you that they say they can do or threaten to do, you can work out deals. You can work out payment plans. You can get interest reduced. You can even settle your debt to some extent. And today you can do that to a much larger extent.
You're listening to This Week in America, Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Norman Perlmutter is our guest on the program. GetOutOfDebtCoach.com. We were talking about the top 10 killer mistakes. And going back to that, in being naive, and sometimes these people call and they're very chatty, and suddenly you find yourself probably giving them more information than you really need to. Should we really limit what we say in conversation when they call?
Absolutely. In fact, my advice to most people is don't engage in conversation with these people. Do everything in writing, because they're good at what they do, and they only have one purpose, and that's to collect money from you. And they'll do it with they'll use any information you give them, even though they may seem friendly. They're not. Their job is to collect money. I'm not saying these are bad people. Many of them aren't. Many of them, this is their job. This is how they make a living, and there's nothing bad about the collection function. It's part of how our commerce works. However, there are a lot of people out there who will use unethical means to try to collect from you, and the last thing you want to do is tell them anything that you don't have to tell them.
And I know you've said in the book that if you really give the impression you can't pay the debt, there's not a whole lot of incentive there for them to keep calling when they feel they're going to end up with nothing.
Well, that's true. I mean, debt collectors work on commission. The company works on commission. The individual collectors that work for the company generally work mostly on commission, and therefore their incentives are to collect the money. And when they get the feeling that they're wasting their time, the chances are they'll spend less time on trying to collect your debt. I'm not saying that the debt will go away, but certainly you won't hear from them as much if you give them the impression, whether it be true or manufactured, or that you don't have the money to pay them. Of course, you still continue to hurt your credit score by doing that, but for some people that really doesn't matter. They're at a point where it doesn't matter anymore.
Top 10 killer mistakes. We're up to number 6, not following a proven debt elimination strategy. This is something big that again, you've talked about. You've got debt rehab programs that you talk about. You discuss them in the book. You have them on the website. Talk a little bit about that you really need to have a strategy.
Well, this is the key. This is really the key. People go to debt consolidation companies. People go to debt settlement companies. These companies offer one individual tactic to help you get out of debt, which would be in the case of consolidation, debt consolidation, which would be in the case of settlement, obviously, debt settlement. It's first of all, settlement is a radical approach to getting out of debt. In many cases, it's not necessary. They charge you a lot of money for these services. Many of them don't even provide you with the service that you pay them for. What you need to do is once you know where you stand, you know how much debt you have, you know how much is going towards interest, you know how much is going towards debt principal. You can figure out how long it's going to take you to pay it off at the rate you're going. Then you start looking at the ways you can attack this. Okay, you may have money. If you're young, you may have money someplace else that's earning at this time almost nothing. If you take that money and you put it towards your debts, you're saving all of that interest, so it's working for you even better. And then you develop other tactics. You can do a debt settlement program on your own. You can consolidate in many ways. You can borrow on. You can use student loan. You can increase your student loan debt to pay off credit card debt because the interest rates on credit debt are much higher. There's numerous ways that you can approach this to work out a program where you can pay off your debt much faster. The main thing, of course, is attacking interest. The more interest, or the bigger the bigger concessions you can get on interest, the faster you're going to pay off your debt. Because obviously, the money you're paying is going towards debt principal and not interest. And there are many ways you can attack the interest rates and get them reduced. And you don't have to go to a debt settlement or a debt consolidation company to help you do that. That's really the key principle is reducing interest rates. And the point is you have to understand where you stand, And you have to understand the things or the devices you can use to help you get out of debt. And using that, you have to build a strategy with a proper sequence of how you go about actually doing it. It'll get you out of debt much faster than you think you can do it.
We're unfortunately out of time. So many things to talk about. Norm will come back. We've got to finish out the top 10. I think one thing to leave everybody with that you keep talking about is you feel helpless when you're in this situation. You feel helpless when you get the phone calls. And there are areas of leverage that you have, and you need to find out what that leverage is. You can find it, again, a lot of free tips available at getoutofdebtcoach.com. The book is How to Settle Your Debts and Climb Out of the Hole You're In Without Committing Financial Suicide. Very good practical advice. Norm, thank you for joining us on This Week in America. Look forward to having you come back, and we'll round out the top 10.
Thank you, Rick. Once again, I appreciate you having me on your show.
Great to have you with us to share this information. You're listening to This Week in America. We'll be right back.